Hi, and thank you for joining us for the demonstration of the Validation Excellence Tool Change Control portion, and that'll be first introduced with our 2018-1 release. Hopefully you've watched the webinar with Dave Hunter on the new features and enhancements that we're introducing with our 2018-1 release. If not, please go to our customer website and review the webinars posted there for the new features and enhancements that we're adding and kind of a description of the rationale for them, how we anticipate them being used, and what new features that you might want to take advantage of with your configuration. We have also already have a webinar recording of our VxT Validation Excellence Tool initial assessment that you must complete before you can move into our change control portion. So please be sure to go watch that webinar as well on how to complete an initial assessment before entering into our change control. Let's log in and take a look at how we use our change control portion. On our customer website, if we go to Solutions, Validation Excellence Tool, the change control portion is part of the initial, same location as our initial assessment. We've added a little bit of information here. We've included your upgrade profile. We want to know what versions you should be upgrading to. If you are Spark or a Cloud Quarterly client, you're going to upgrade every quarter. If you are a Cloud Annual client, you will upgrade from our annual release to annual release. So you have implemented, say, 11.7. You won't be upgrading until 2018-3 is released in the fall as a Cloud Annual client. Our hosted and premise clients obviously don't have managed upgrades and will choose when to upgrade. And are only able to install and use the existing annual releases. So currently 11.7 is the only one available to our premise clients and premise and hosted clients. The next level of assessment would be at 2018-3 if they chose to upgrade at that time. For the sake of ease, we're going to do this as a Cloud Quarterly client. I've already completed my initial assessment on 2017-2. So let's go in and start our change control to upgrade to 2018-1. We'll click our Start Assessment button, which will bring us to our module selection page. The module selection here is a little different than we had previously. We know which modules we assessed initially in 2017-2, but we may want to deprecate a module from usage, or through the phased implementation approach, we may be adding a module to our usage. So we can go in and change which modules we're assessing. If we remove a module, let's say audit has been deprecated from our production usage, you're required to add a comment as to why it's being removed. This comment will be ported into our change control form, and you're given this warning here as well as to who this information is going to be added to a document. Let's be sure that this is what you want to present to, say, an auditor. This text field has no limit on its character length, so while you probably shouldn't add the Great American Novel, you can certainly add enough information and detail as you need to. If we were doing a phased implementation approach and I wanted to add a module to my usage, I'm adding risk as part of my production usage, I would select this here and select Save and Continue. At that point, I'm going to do an initial assessment on risk. Because risk was not part of my usage in 2017-2, I still need to do that baseline risk assessment to look at the holistic usage approach for that new module. So this will look exactly as it did for our initial assessment. We'll put in our information for our new module. And again, it's going to be an initial assessment because I'm implementing it on 2018-1. And these scores that come from Master Control are based on our 2018-1 testing and information. Once that's completed, I'm able to go to start my change control assessment. For our change control, the assessment is a little different than what we saw for our initial assessment. On initial assessment, we looked at a holistic usage approach, so every component of every module that you might be using to look at the baseline, how am I using this software? For change control, because we know that you started on 17.2, that's where our initial assessment was, we have the ability to have the data of what changed in our software between 17.2 and 18.1 in a much more granular, refined way. So first we'll review the features that were introduced in the 18.1 code base. Each of these features have a hover text, so we have our enhancement ID listed here, and the hover text includes the information about what that feature is. And if you have any questions or concerns about any of these, please point back to the 2018-1 Enhancements and Features webinar from Dave Hunter. Our software risk is significantly different in the change control assessment because we have that baseline risk. We know exactly what changed in the code between 17.2 and 18.1. So the variables that we assess for our software risk are the cyclomatic complexity of the code base for this change for the enhancement. Essentially, how many different logic paths are coded into this new feature. Coding touch points or code impact. How integrated is this new feature throughout the master control software? Is this something that only impacts a very small portion of, say, advanced packets for documents, or is this an update to our search query through the database that impacts everything throughout the master control software? The size of code change is literally how many lines of code did we have to write to enable this new enhancement. Frequency of occurrence is how well is this new feature integrated into our best practice configurations? As you'll remember from our initial assessments, Master Control has started documenting our best practice configuration and usage of our software. When we have new enhancements and features that come in, we want to assess do we need to adjust our best practices to take advantage of these? One of the examples might be the info card author and owner being introduced as a special user through the documents workflow. We reviewed our best practices and determined that that's not something that we're going to add to our best practice for a variety of reasons. But every new feature and enhancement is assessed in that manner with a services group. The last one is how well is this new feature covered through our functional testing? What is the OQ mitigation of the introduction of this new feature? And that puts together our software risk. As you'll notice, these are not editable the same way that they were from the initial assessment, that these are scores from master control that you don't have an impact on because it is so much of the coding changes. The part that you are interested in is our client risk assessment. The first column that we have here is impact to configuration. How much did I have to change my existing configuration to take advantage of this new enhancement? For example, before when we were talking about adding info card author and owner as a special user for document workflows, you may want to take advantage of that enhancement and redo your workflows and remove, say, originator of the packet as the special user role and add info card author or owner. So you would need to review of what configuration changes to your software need to be made to take advantage of this new enhancement. Client risk assessment is the same assessment as initial assessment. Essentially, what is your gut feeling about this risk? Based upon your experience with Master Control during your initial implementation or your initial upgrade to 11.7, based upon your industry experience of your gut feeling about this feature or this usage. What is your subjective client company-based risk assessment that you would apply to this? The third column is tested in our TPQs. How well is this new feature tested as through the usage testing through the standard module TPQs? This is pre-populated by Master Control based upon how well, from our perspective, we think this is tested. But again, if your usage of these new enhancements is so different than our best practices, we want these to be editable for you to change. This gives us our overall client risk score. We then combine our software risk and client risk score to give the overall risk and a usage testing recommendation for the change. Another portion of the review are high and critical defects that have been resolved with this release. Master Control has an impact score that is proprietary and internal for each of our defects. And so for change control, you only need to assess the critical and high defects. That is provided by Master Control. Our client risk assessment, again, is your internal assessment that you may have for the defect. If you've run into this issue previously, if this has been an ongoing pain point for you, or if it's a defect fix in a critical area that you want to do additional usage testing around to ensure that you that we've actually resolved it appropriately. There are two mitigations that we have for our defects. Just our internal regression testing, which is an ad hoc testing to ensure that it's been functioning appropriately. And then if it was validated through a patch. So we run patch validation protocols on a monthly or quarterly basis based upon the number of patches and defects that we have each release. And that those patch validations are available for download from our customer website. That gives us our likely probability of occurrence. How likely does this defect not be resolved, or that we didn't resolve it appropriately and didn't catch any issues during our testing. Gives an overall risk score, and then any recommendations of if additional testing is recommended for the clients on their site. Once all of our modules have been assessed, if you'll remember that we removed audit from our usage in 2018-1 and so we'd only have portal that we're using through change control and we're issuing BOM through initial assessment. We then go to our upload logo page. Your logo will be saved from your previous assessment, so if it's already been uploaded for the initial assessment, you don't need to go in and upload it again. But sometimes branding changes for companies, and so you may have a new logo that you want to upload, so we wanted to give you that option. So we'll say use this logo. We'll have two documents come out of this as opposed to the one from initial assessment. Because we added BOM, or risk, I apologize, we added the risk module, and we did an initial assessment on the 2018-1 code base for risk. We'll have an addendum validation assessment. This is identical essentially to the initial assessment template, but we're listing it as an addendum because it's only against the 2018-1 code base for the risk module that we added through this change control. The next document that we've added is our change control document. So let's export this file and we'll go through that one through a little bit more detail. In our the purpose of a change control form is to allow us to consolidate the validation documentation that we're creating for each upgrade. As you know, validation is a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of documentation, and if we're asking you to do this every quarter, we wanted to streamline that process as much as possible. Our change control form pre-populates with certain information and it is editable for you to add your own specific information. So our client name is the company name pulled from our customer website, the date of the assessments. We know that you're on 17.2 and upgrading to 2018-1. Our rationale for upgrade, it pulls in the information that we added on the previous page, if you recall, that we removed audit and and here's our rationale for removing audit. This is editable, that I can add additional rationales of upgrading due to cloud quarterly managed upgrade requirements, or if I'm premise or hosted, upgrading for the latest enhancements or new modules available to clients in 2018-3. The timeline from upgrade, you can add in yourself of when you have started. For example, for this, it would be 22 March, and then when I expect to go live with the production version. As a way of consolidating our validation documents, we took the pertinent information from the validation plan user requirements and TOQ risk assessment, TOQ acceptance risk management plan document, and brought them all into a change control form. So this will be pre-populated with any new user requirements that were introduced as part of the 2018-1 software. It'll include the modules that are being upgraded and validated as part of this release. We will list out any deliverables that need to be created, so the IQ forms, which are created by master control, this change control form, potentially usage testing based upon the VxT recommendation. A portion of this that will be pre-populated, it will be the deviations found during our internal OQ validation. These are taken directly from our final report for the 2018-1 documentation, as well as any of the internal usage testing TPQ deviations that were found. And so that risk assessment is here. As in our TOQ acceptance document, we review the project system and validation risks of the master control upgrade. And most often that we find for a lot of our clients that those risks haven't really changed during an upgrade. They're still using the software in the same way. The validation risks and resourcing concerns are the same as they were before. The system risks for the backup and restore procedures and disaster recovery planning and server configurations are all at the same level, or have all the same concerns as we did before. In the event that something has changed here, we do have the option to kind of list out, here's what's changed on my hardware perspective, here's what's changed for my validation. Maybe we brought a validation resource in-house entirely, so my validation risks have gone down significantly. And it adds place to add some descriptions of those changes. Our enhancements and defects are ported directly from the tool, as well as our recommended usage testing. You would then sign off on this change control, and that allows you to move to that usage testing portion of the software validation. So if any of these indicated that usage testing was recommended, you would write a usage script to cover those specific components or features or defects to ensure that they have been properly qualified and validated. And then any defects that were identified during that testing would be listed into the change control form. If none of these are recommended, you can simply NA out these lines and say validation complete. I am fully leveraging the master control TPQ and TOQ testing, and sign off on the completion of the validation. Then when master control installs the 2018-1 code on your production environment, you can add the date of that installation and sign off on the post-installation change control to close out your change control form. By doing so, this form now takes the place of your validation summary report as it details the life cycle and the validation activities that were created during your validation effort. By using this form, we have streamlined and consolidated your validation documentation from about 6 forms to 2 between the change control and IQ and potentially client-specific PQ usage testing. And that are what we're hoping with our change control process is that we will be able to streamline your validation to leverage as much of the internal master control testing as possible to allow you to sign off on your change control and be ready for go live within days of having the new code installed on your test environment. And that is our VxT change control portion in a nutshell. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'm Erin Wright. I'm our Validation Product Manager at Master Control, and I am happy to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for joining us.